Okay, Chair Dickey, I think we're ready to begin whenever you are.
Good, thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. Oh, I'd just like to start off today with the land acknowledgement. I'd like to start this meeting by recognizing that the area we call the Fraser Valley Regional District has been home to the Lakatma, the Shatatlium, Stalo, and Stalas peoples for generations. There are 31 communities with reserved lands in the FERD's jurisdiction and as many as 69 groups with interests in the area. This diverse landscape means that there are many different viewpoints that need to be considered when we make decisions, because what we decide as local government can affect everyone in different ways now and in the future. So as part of our collective responsibility, I commit that we continually examine the work we do to ensure that our projects, plans, initiatives, and discussion are guided by the principles of inclusion, collaboration, and reconciliation today and in the future. So with that in mind, I'd like to call to order the May 9th, 2024 meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee, and I would apologize for my pronunciation of the First Nations names. Special welcome to Rob Dean, alternate director for filling Director Adama. Welcome. And I'll turn things to Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. So the first item on our agenda is your report from this morning's Regional and Corporate Services Committee meeting.
Good, thank you. So this morning, the RACS meeting, we talked about tax requisition results, and Director Castle expressed concern that the report's charts might be misinterpreted as meaning that tax rates were decreasing. We talked about the call answer levy update, and Director Horn moved that we seek support from the other regional districts in British Columbia for added cell phone charges to the levy. And there's unanimous support for that motion. In the reports from directors part of the meeting, the issue of construction fill dumping in electoral areas was pointed out, and the question was put forward whether the municipal directors would be supportive of a planning exercise, including the provincial government, to better regulate this problem. There seemed to be a consensus among the committee directors that there was a need to work towards a solution to this issue. The mayor suggested that Ms. Kinnaman get together with our municipal CAOs to discuss the issue further, and a motion was moved that Ms. Kinnaman meet with our municipal CAOs and pursue a direction to deal with construction fill. That motion met with unanimous support. I hope I have the motion somewhat close to being right.
It was very good. Thank you.
Good. I'll turn things back to Ms. Kinnaman.
Great. So looking for approval of the agenda, and late items.
Motion, Director Wardberg, second, Director Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Item 5.1 is seasonal outlook. It's a staff presentation by Chirena College.
Welcome, Ms. College.
Thank you. Seasonal outlook. So emergency management staff across the Southwest region, which includes the 4 regional districts, Fraser Valley Regional District, Metro Vancouver Regional District, Squamish-Lillooet, and Sunshine Coast, all gathered to hear our seasonal outlook for a once-a-year in-person session, which was held in Burnaby. Some of the considerations from that are, I think, not misaligned with anything that we've been seeing, hearing, and anticipating through our winter, as we look at the snow or absence of it on the hills around us, when we would typically still see white really low on the mountaintops. Pardon me. This is our current state of drought province-wide. You can see that we are already experiencing drought or still experiencing drought from the holdover of last fall. We haven't had a lot of precipitation. The forecast is looking extremely interesting for anybody who watches forecasts. And there are a number of correlating impacts to consider when we start seeing drought that help us really think about what it means to have drinking water and what it means to have hay that grows for agricultural needs. as well as what it means to be ready to respond when wildfires outbreak in our landscape. A drought in this position at this early in the year, we're primarily in drought level 2 throughout the entirety of FVRD, demonstrates that there's not a lot of water that's likely to be replenishing water basins at this point. There may be more cross-jurisdictional water constrictions, water restrictions from systems that provide water to other areas. There's environmental concerns. Right now, what we're tracking, or what is being tracked by the parties responsible, is this lovely black line, the thick black line sort of towards the bottom of this. This is our snow basin index that is found and gathered by digital data monitoring stations. The tracked record is going back as far as 1988 with these digital snow monitoring systems, and that black line is showing that snow is sort of, or the cold weather is sticking along a little bit longer than average, but our snow is at a record low for this point in the year since 1988. There's a lot of considerations at play when it comes to the season of emergencies, shall we say, and I'm starting to think this might just be not a hazard season anymore, but the season of evacuation readiness. We used to see overlapping or very disaggregated seasons, and then we saw overlapping seasons of freshet that happened typically before wildfire, and now we're seeing wildfire start up before freshet, and this year we're seeing sort of an absence of freshet and jumping straight to wildfire. I want to take a moment and just think about what an incident is in comparison to an emergency. And for those who attended the Electoral Area Directors Workshop on Emergency Planning, when we handed out a little bit of a guide, staff in emergency management will not be notified of incidents. Incidents are things that happen day to day at an incident site level. They're handled within mutual aid resourcing, within standard resourcing, and by the organizations that are assigned within their mandate to respond to those. So emergency management becomes involved, situational monitoring about ongoing seasonal hazards, and when an incident commander at an incident scene has recognized that something might be a little bit more than what is reasonable to handle within their mutual aid resourcing and might need that conduit to a state of local emergency. We do have standardized notification protocols. Our first responders know how they reach out to the emergency management duty officer, and that duty officer line exists 24/7, 365 days a year, and we share the responsibility to cover that within our emergency management team. Recently, we hosted a wildfire coastal fire center and regional district emergency management workshop. The 14 regional districts that occur or exist within the coastal fire center gathered together in a hybrid manner to reaffirm the notification protocols and contacts. So I want to offer that to you today, more than anything, as a sense of confidence that we still have ongoing relationships with wildfire. The province has got some really great processes where there are other duty officer type roles for both wildfire dispatch and emergency management through what's called the Emergency Coordination Center, all again monitored and diligently staffed. Staff could be requested in this landscape of cross-competing hazards and finite resources to deploy to other jurisdictions that are in need of support. And we've just released, through our public media release, the new hazard report and emergency management plan. So all of these are really relevant to our hazard season. I share this map with you because it shows us not just what's happening here today and what's happening in BC, and often our news media focuses what's solely on us. We've got a lot of agriculture in our electoral areas, and while we're not a provider to electoral area agricultural services, the lack of precipitation countrywide can have impacts on our agricultural markets, on grasses and grains available to feed livestock, on a demand for response assets, on general availability of water across Canada. And it's really important, if you have agriculture in your area, to be encouraging agricultural producers to check into agri-stability and agri-insurance programs. They need to have pieces in play to sustain themselves when there are interruptions. And then furthermore, to register for the provincial premises ID program. Agricultural producers need to be registering for that. It is lawfully required. That being said, it's not something we have a role in. However, when we have to stand up an emergency operations center and we need data on what is likely to be registered in the area we're issuing an evacuation order, we can work with the Ministry of Agriculture, and with that premises ID program, the Ministry of Ag is able to provide a report to us rather quickly of approximately the head of how many quantity of head of each type of species may be in that area. That's really important when we start thinking about the planning that goes into supporting farmers as they evacuate their own livestock. We want them to know what the challenges are in registering for that, or as a result of registering for that, in what their responsibilities are in getting their cattle or their other livestock herds out. It's helpful information when we have to think about it through an emergency operations center as to where someone is going and what the capacity is of somewhere else to support. There's a number of messaging efforts happening across BC. We notice messages are really ramping up, and it's proactive. And I think it's really important to reflect that since the atmospheric rivers, our province is stepping up their game in how they talk to our constituents. This is a really beneficial thing, but it also creates complexity when those messages are maybe not harmonized well between each ministry, and some may point to local government, some may point to another ministry. And so as you're being invited to engage in some of these sessions, I want you to think about whether you've heard a message that may be slightly different, and then think about connecting back to staff. What does that actually mean in the landscape of FVRD? Is there something more that I need to learn, and which department does it come from? So that we can make sure that the most accurate FVRD messaging is making it out through you and to our constituents, or through our communications channel to our constituents. You'll hear messaging commonly since last year about how local government is going to help you when your well runs dry. And I want to really put this one top message out there. Licensed water utilities are going to help you when your water is run dry by the water utility provider. It's so important for those of us on groundwater wells to think about water security. It's equally as important for private operators such as the Huckleberry water system and the Hemlock water system to think about their responsibilities in providing water to their service area. And then FVRD has plans in place where our infrastructure that provides water would have succession planning if there were water interruptions. It's fantastic if we're giving the risk reduction messaging to our constituents about rainwater harvesting and fire smart activities. We can absolutely not in any way, shape, or form argue the value of fire smarting each of our own properties. We want to continue with proactive messaging at our level, and we want to continue to understand the proactive messaging of those different ministries. There's a myriad of info sources, and I'd be happy to provide more links, but today the province released that it's got a new communications dashboard. It is glad to be creating a digital emergency management home-based planning tool, and a family can download its PDF emergency plan after it's gone through the questions and answers. So that's a really beneficial option. And then again, the wildfire app. There are a number of layered impacts. FVRD has experienced droughts in most years since 2017. And that's not just FVRD, that's beyond us. So really, really think about what that drought means when the ground is not able to saturate itself enough based on the lack of precipitation. We need people to be prepared this year, and we need to be ready to understand that it could be a big response here province-wide. I've got a number of information sources there that you could snap a photo of, or we could give you a list of. But again, these are areas and places where constituents could be provided to gain public information. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Ms. College. Sounded a little alarming. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. If I may, it's more than a little alarming. It's darn right scary. Thank you for your presentation, and I would like to get links, especially with regards to the agricultural stability. If there's information, you suggested sharing that information with our agricultural residents. If you have information that you think is worthy of sharing, if you could forward that. When we look around at some other jurisdictions that have begun to take proactive steps, and I understand the forward thinking and the proactive response strategies that we're working on at the FVRD. But when I look, Abbotsford Mission has already implemented water restrictions. And there was a great article in the CBC about proactive forest management by the regional district in the Kelowna area. Huge question. How do you see what can we be doing at the FVRD to be proactive in mitigating some of the effects of climate change?
Thank you. That's a challenging question for me to answer from an emergency management perspective. I think it would be best that I connect with whoever is responsible for considerations that are well beyond emergency management, but have direct correlations to our likely response and potential recoveries, and facilitate your conversation through the right channels.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, while I feel very confident in our activities around response, I wonder if we can do more around mitigation.
Thank you, Director Capsule. Director Warden.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to staff. Thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it. I just have a question about water restrictions in our bylaws. Do we have the authority to restrict water usage to the users of water systems owned by the Fraser Valley Regional District?
Chair, I think we should turn that one over to Tarek Islam, our Director of Engineering.
Through Mr. Chair, thank you. We do have a bylaw that we can enact in terms of water restrictions. But a good portion of those are based on voluntary measure because of we don't have resources to monitor all the time what's happening, but we have those bylaws that we can enact if needed.
So,
Tarek, if you could also just follow up on our ability to oversee or enforce private water utilities.
In terms of private water, we don't have any bylaws because of those are private systems, and they have their own way of dealing with it. And province those are actually controlled by the Water Controller's Office in Victoria, and they have to rely on their own resources to monitor them. Regional district can't do that. We only look after our own water systems.
okay, thank you. So we could send out a notice of restrictions to the users. I know it'd be hard to enforce it, but we could give them notice anyway, correct? Of water restrictions.
Yes, we are monitoring all our systems. We have 14 water systems, 2 of them are on surface water. So if when we see that it is important for us to do that, we will of course have those informations out to the public through our communications. And we are actually in next week on May 14th, we have a meeting in this boardroom. It's actually, the meeting is called by the province, and it invited all member municipalities, and regional district is kind of facilitating just to hold it for them. And also all the private utilities and some interest groups are invited to come to that meeting. And that meeting is basically coordinating the drought situation and how we can handle and how we can respond. And also the coordination is important because of, for an example, the city of Chilliwack has their own bylaw. And if they're enacting those bylaws, water restrictions, it's different than in Popcom, for an example. We have very close neighbor water systems nearby, but we may not be in the same positions because of city of Chilliwack has a population of 90,000, whereas in Popcom, we have got a population of 500, 600 people that relies on those water systems. But we monitor them. They may not be in the same situation, but we will advise accordingly.
And if I can just further add, regardless of whether or not we have a bylaw in place, typically year over year, we have been doing proactive messaging for the community to remind everyone that they should be mindful and using a sort of a public education component for people to just reduce their water.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, I was just having a quick look at the water conservation bylaw, which refers to our various stages of water conservation. Um, it hasn't been clear to me as to what triggers those stages and what the criteria is. I know there's language in there that says for declaration of conservation stages in consultation with the affected electoral area director, the board, and the affected community, the FERD Director of Engineering and Community Services or designate may declare that the FERD has activated a water conservation stage, et cetera, et cetera. Then it goes on to talk about the different stages. But it's just, I'm honestly not sure is what would trigger us. And given that we've got a variety of water systems all over the place, what that criteria would look like. And to have us go into a stage 1 or 2 or higher. Could you just comment on criteria and how you go about navigating all this?
Through Mr. Chair to Director Davidson, as I said before, we are monitoring all our water sources, whether it's well or a creek, and depending on how the weather pattern and as well as our system is doing, we will decide on that. And of course, as you read out, that we will be consulting with our area director as well as the communities on that.
I guess for me, if the community came to me and said, okay, so what would trigger a water conservation stage 1 or stage 4? I get it that you're monitoring. It's of course necessary to monitor, but I guess I'm just looking for some idea as to what would actually trigger a stage. And I get it. It's not simple, but to me, it's a fair question for the community to answer, after 40 days of drought says, well, when is the FERD gonna impose water conservation? What's happening there? I don't really have an answer.
If
Anyway.
I could just, through the chair and also for the committee's benefit, just advise that staff have reminded me that the water conservation bylaw is not in place in electoral areas A, B, D, and DeRoche. So just for your awareness. And I believe, just looking to Tarek and Sterling, this issue was raised many years ago and was quite an issue of debate at this table. And so that would be the historical reasons for those exclusions.
So going back in my poor memory, I believe area D was not included in that because the staff said there's no history of threatened water levels of our aquifer. And I believe I talked to engineering staff last fall, and they said last year we had the worst drought conditions in 30 years, and our water levels in our wells were as high as would be normal. So I think what our engineering staff are saying is they monitor each system and will react to conditions that are threatening. Am I right in that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Our systems are relatively so small compared to municipalities. So, we often end up comparing, but it is not comparable. For an example, Yale water system sits on an aquifer of Fraser River, and it has about 80 residents there, maybe 200 in terms of population. So just an example, if you compare that with any smaller municipalities like Hope, it would be totally different because of Hope is a population of 5,000. So the only way I can say is that we do monitor them, and if we see there's something going wrong, then we will seek advice externally as well with the province, and maybe have our consultants or hydrogeologists look into it. But we will act accordingly and ask people there to reduce their water system, water usage. Sorry.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Islam. Thank you, Director Davidson, Director Castle.
I appreciate that tidbit of information from the CAO, but it may have opened a can of worms. There were a number of reactions at this table when you said that. So trying to figure out the best way to ask this question, I think I heard that it was some years ago that that decision was made. Chair Dickey can't even remember, it was so long ago. Lots has changed since a long time ago. Would staff advise us to take another look at that?
I'll just look to Tarek to answer that one, but of course, I think if the committee wanted to direct staff to bring back that bylaw for discussion at this table, we would be happy to entertain that. Just looking to Tarek's.
Yes, if the board direction is that way, we will come back to ESCA and bring updated bylaw.
I think you can appreciate the communications challenge that this one has always presented. You know, first, when you see a municipality that issues watering restriction notices, that's very easy because everyone in the community is on their water system. Whereas in an electoral area, that is not going to be the case. So if we were to issue watering restrictions for area G, for example, or area D, it's only going to be applicable to those individuals that are on our water systems. And so it gets very complicated in terms of public understanding of who is allowed to water their lawns and who is not, or who falls under that bylaw. And then if you add in the added complexity where certain electoral areas are excluded from the bylaw, it then gets it even more complicated to communicate out to the public. So I'm certain that staff would welcome any opportunities where we can find alignment across the 8 electoral areas on any issue.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Kinnaman. So staff, your recommendation at this time would be to take a second look at this bylaw, or is that something that's going to be very complicated and have very limited results?
No, staff can go back and look at it and then bring it back for your information, and then you can make a decision based on that.
Okay, so you would like a formal motion in regards to that?
Yes, please.
So would someone like to make a motion that these water use regulations through this bylaw be once again taken a look at? Move Director Castle, second Director Wardenberg. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Welcome, Miss Director Dixon.
Well, I've been here the whole time. I just had my camera off. Thank you.
Ms. Kinnaman.
Just Chair, are there any other questions for
Excuse me.
Serena College?
Poor Miss College, we kind of got sidelined there, but in regards to the emergency management issues around the drought conditions, etc. Doesn't look like there's any other discussion. I'm sure this is a concerning issue, but it appears that our emergency management staff are well out in front and responding to this in a way that'll look after us. So thank you again, Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you. So 6.1 is the draft Electoral Area Services Committee meeting minutes of April the 11th, 2024.
Motion, move Director Johnson, second Director Wardenberg. Discussion, hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
7.1 is bylaw offense notice enforcement amendment bylaw number 1724.
Motion Director Castle, second Director Dean. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
8.1 is the 2023 Electoral Area Annual Development Cost Charge Report.
Information only. Discussion, here's not.
Moving to 8.2, we have a 2024 grant and aid request for the Cultus Lake Fire Department Association in Electoral Area H.
Appears Director Dixon has disappeared on us. A motion, move Director Wardenberg, second Director McAhonik. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
8.3 is a 2024 grant and aid request for Columbia Valley Fire Department Association in Electoral Area H.
Motion. Director Dixon moves, second Director McAhonik. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
9.1 is Area C Official Community Plan and Associated Neighborhood Plans process for bylaw consideration. And we do have a staff presentation from Caitlin Hipwell.
Welcome, Ms. Hipwell.
Thank
Beg
you.
file.
Okay, so good afternoon. Today I'm here to present to sort of supplement the staff report that's included in today's agenda and to discuss the projects that are currently being undertaken in Area C. This would be the official community plan and the associated neighborhood plans. Now, my presentation and staff report today are very specific to the process for bylaw consideration. You can expect that there will be subsequent presentations and reports from staff that will provide summaries of consultation that's occurred on these projects, as well as an overview of the land use plans and policy directions for all three projects. But today we'll focus just on the process for bylaw consideration. So the three projects that are the topic of today's discussion are the Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan, the Area C OCP Review and Update, and the Lake Erock Gravel Pit Redevelopment Application, also known as the Harrison Rise Application. Now together, these three projects will ultimately come together as the new Area C OCP bylaw. So this timeline, while brief, what I want to kind of illustrate for the committee today is how each of these projects has sort of undertaken their own path over the last couple of years. They're all on their own timelines. So the first project kicked off in fall of 2021, and this was for the Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan. So this plan was initiated based on significant development interest in the Harrison Mills area and some proposals brought forward for development. And this has been an FERD-led neighborhood planning process. The following year, in July 2022, the FERD received a development application for the Lake Erock Gravel Pit redevelopment. So this was an application for major OCP and zoning amendments for the existing Lake Erock Gravel Pit. A couple months later, in the fall of 2022, FERD staff again began another community planning process in Area C, and that was for the Area C Official Community Plan Update, which was identified on the regular EA planning work plan as a priority project for that year. The following summer in 2023, the FERD entered into a developer contribution agreement for the Lake Erock Gravel Pit redevelopment application. And what this did was it allowed for capacity funding to facilitate the analysis of that development application and to undertake the necessary planning and engineering works associated with that application review. That brings us to now, coming into the summer of 2024, where we see all three projects, the Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan, the Area C OCP, and the Lake Erock Neighborhood Plan, coming to a point where they'll be ready in the next couple of months for board's consideration of first reading. So in terms of how we've managed these projects so far, we've had a combination of FERD-led processes as well as an application-driven process, and these are distinct in their own way. So we have the Area C OCP and the Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan, and these have been FERD-led projects. And then we also have the application for redevelopment of the Lake Erock Gravel Pit, and that really is that sort of applicant-driven process. Alongside that, we also have the staggered timing of interest in Area C. So we have development interests that have occurred at different stages, and then our own work plan priorities, which haven't aligned with those interests necessarily. So for these reasons, we've seen each of these projects managed very separately, very distinctly. So despite the fact that they have been managed separately up till now, I think it's important to highlight that all of these projects are certainly interrelated. The work that's been done on all of them is very complementary to one another. So we have our Area C OCP, which staff often refer to as sort of our umbrella policy. This is our high-level, broad overview of how we plan to manage growth in Area C through neighborhood plans. And what our OCP does is it really sets forth the principles for interconnected rural villages. We see these principles really applied in our neighborhood plans. So we have our Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan that presents that integrated rural village development concept. And there's definitely that connection back to the OCP with those kind of high-level principles that were identified being really applied at the neighborhood level. And then we also have the Lake Arrock gravel pit redevelopment application. So this application is for a residential development with supplementary commercial uses. And the development itself has considerable offsite impacts, and certainly the consideration of the application requires integration with the existing neighborhood. The application is of kind of the scope and scale that requires policy considerations that go beyond just the land subject to the application themselves. It really spills out into that existing neighborhood. And so as the analysis of this application has evolved, we've really seen a body of policy form around this application that has developed into a neighborhood plan as well. And so again, you see that connection back to the OCP, where you're seeing those principles of interconnected rural villages being applied at that neighborhood level. So I'll provide a brief overview of the engagement that we've undertaken on these 3 projects so far. And just keeping in mind that staff will be back to the committee in the coming months to provide a really comprehensive summary of all of the engagement that has occurred. Today, what I really want to illustrate is the notion that each of these projects has been distinct and that has translated into their engagement processes as well. So we have undertaken significant public engagement for all 3 projects. This has been in the form of public meetings that have been specific to each individual project. We also have individual project pages on the FERD's Have Your Say website for each one of these policy projects. We've also met with the community, done surveys and sent out newsletters, each specific to these projects. Those principles have also translated into our agency referrals. So staff have undertaken early agency referrals for all 3 projects separately. This has resulted in discussions with our government partners, MOTI, BC Transit, school districts, neighboring municipalities, etc. And all of those conversations have been focused specifically on each of these projects. Now, of course, for efficiency, oftentimes we'll find ourselves meeting with a jurisdiction. It's one meeting, but we are very cognizant that we are addressing 3 distinct projects. And so we've done that in many of our meetings with our agency partners. And then these principles, again, are translated into the ongoing Indigenous engagement that has occurred for all 3 projects. So in Area C, the OCP plan area, we have 15 Indigenous communities or governing bodies that have varying degrees of interest in the plan area. But we have 3 primary communities, that'd be Lacamal, Skowlitz, and Stahelis, that have significant interest in the plan area. And they also all have reserve lands within the plan area. So we recognize that they have strong level of interest, but also that their priorities are different depending on the project that we're discussing. And so staff have been very cognizant to ensure that our engagement has addressed all 3 projects simultaneously, while also addressing the fact that the level of priority or importance placed on each project varies significantly with each community. So you can see all of these projects really begin to mesh together as we move through the process. And it brings us to today, where we see that these 3 projects really coming to the point where they will be ready for consideration of first reading by the board. And so staff are looking for direction from the board to determine which process which process is appropriate to bring those bylaws forward for consideration. So the staff report outlines 3 options, and the staff recommendation is to go with option 1, which is the combined consideration bylaw. So this would see the OCP, the Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan, and the Lake Arrock Neighborhood Plan brought forward for the board's consideration as a single bylaw. So this option is the most expedited timeline. It is the most efficient way to bring these bylaws forward for the board's consideration. Staff also feel that this is the clearest presentation of the overall growth management concept for Area C. Also, there is only a single public hearing and a single referral process required for this option. What this option does involve is it really ties that development application, that Lake Arrock Neighborhood Plan, which has formed around a development application, ties it in with the OCP and Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan. And so that's something to be cognizant of when considering this option. that although it's coming forward as a single bylaw, there is certainly a component of this bylaw that is directly related to a development application as opposed to an FERD-led planning process. So the second option for the board's consideration is to bring concurrent bylaws forward. So that would mean one bylaw comes forward for the OCP and the Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan. And at the same time, the board considers a separate bylaw for the Lake Erock Neighborhood Plan. So in terms of timeline, this option kind of sits right in the middle. It's a moderate timeline. But what it does require is 2 versions of the OCP be drafted. And it also requires that 2 public hearings are undertaken. The benefit of option 2 is that it does retain a distinct process for that application-driven process. That application remains distinct and undertakes a separate public hearing where it's the only consideration before being merged back in with the OCP and Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan. And then we have our third option, which would be for the board to consider sequential bylaws. This would mean that the OCP and the Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan would come forward as a single bylaw, and that process would be undertaken in full. So it would go from first reading all the way through to adoption before we would see that Lake Erock Neighborhood Plan come forward later as an amendment to our new OCP. This is certainly the most extended timeline. The most impacted component in this timeline is the Lake Erock Neighborhood Plan, that plan that's been developed around a development application. They're being put at the back of the line. OCP and Harrison Mills go before they can even be considered. This process would also require 2 public hearings, the first one for the OCP and Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan, and then again, a public hearing to amend that new plan to include the Lake Erock Neighborhood Plan. The benefit of option 3, again, is that it really keeps that development application distinct from the FERD-led processes of the OCP and Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan. But other than that, it is certainly an extended timeline. So this is a very simplistic graph, kind of built off of image 2 in the staff report. But what I really wanted to illustrate here for you today was just that time to undertake each of these processes. So we start with option 1, which is our most expedited timeline. And as we move into option 2 and option 3, you can see the stages for consideration increase. In some cases, there are duplications of process where we are repealing readings and rereading. We're doing second public hearings, etc. So you really see that option 1 is the most expedited, option 2 falling somewhere in the middle, and then option 3 being the most extended timeline for considering these 3 projects. So in terms of next steps, staff are seeking direction from the board in terms of the preferred option to bring these projects forward for consideration. Once staff have received that direction, we will bring the bylaw for consideration of first reading in the coming months. And that will be accompanied with a presentation to the committee that will summarize the OCP and the neighborhood plans in full, providing summaries of the land use plans and the policy directions that are taken in all 3 projects. So that's it for me today. If there's any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Hipwell. Obviously, you're very well versed on this subject. Directors, discussion.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It's been a long process. I'm going to ask a couple questions before the motion comes on, and then a bunch of questions afterwards. But as far as the Lake Erock Neighborhood Plan, and so that is, just for clarity, just so I can clarify in my own mind, that is an OCP amendment to the current OCP, correct?
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg, it really would depend on the process that we take, which option we take. If we take the combined option as is being recommended by staff, the Lake Erock Neighborhood Plan, which is that plan that was kind of created around the development application, goes as repeal and replace of our existing OCP bylaw. So it's like an amendment, but really what we're doing is we're repealing our former bylaw that was adopted in 2000, and we're replacing it with this brand new bylaw.
A new OCP. But right now, as it stands, the application is for an OCP amendment of the existing OCP.
That is correct. So early in the stage, and this was outlined in a former staff report, but just for clarity, I'll summarize it as best as I can. Early in the process, when the applicant was in discussions with staff about their proposal, there was a discussion about whether or not the applicant could make an application or undertake a neighborhood planning process. The applicant chose to make an application for their development proposal, and that's a major OCP and rezoning, instead of going through the neighborhood plan process that at the time was recommended by staff. So yes, you're correct. The application has come in as an OCP amendment to the existing OCP. As the project has evolved and consideration of the application has kind of moved through the process, the body of policy that is required and has been developed around this application to address some of those off-site impacts that I kind of broadly covered in the presentation. That's what has resulted in a neighborhood plan that we're calling the Lake Rock Neighborhood Plan.
Yeah, that is my concern as well, is that basically if the old OCP is antiquated, it's old, the policy, so even under amendment, and correct me if I'm wrong, even under amendment of the old OCP, you would basically be rewriting the OCP.
That's correct. The scope and scale of the development proposal for the Lake Rock gravel pit is such that it requires going into almost every section of the OCP. There are so many components that need to be addressed that are beyond just a site-specific consideration. When we talk about integrating with the existing community, connecting to that community, hazard mitigation, environmental protection, there are so many elements of the OCP that are affected by this application.
Not to mention the First Nations negotiation or the
Yeah,
consideration. Okay, I'll leave my other comments after the motion.
Good, thank you, Director Wardenberg. So we might want to entertain a motion at this time. Yeah, Director Wardenberg, second Director Johnson. Any discussion?
Davidson?
Director Davidson.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear. Was that on the mic? Was that option 1 that was moved?
Great, yes.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if staff could back up to that slide that showed the varying timeframes for options 1, 2, and 3. Would mind sharing that again?
Yeah, certainly. Just give me 1 second.
Sure. Thank you. So I see the attraction to option 1 in terms of time frame and et cetera. Just so I understand, I guess the risk behind this is that if, for example, you're on option 1, you get all the way through to public hearing and you feel you're good to go on sake of argument OCP and the Hemlock portion, but Lake Eric has some rework to do, then basically that rework may see itself in third reading, or due to the nature of the rework, you may be going back to a public hearing stage again as a result of that rework. I have to apologize. I'm still not clear on process for these kinds of things. I'm just wondering if you could clarify that for me a little bit.
Yeah, certainly, through the chair to Director Davidson. So what you're suggesting is certainly a possibility that staff have considered. So by combining all 3 projects, really the public hearing affects all 3 projects, and the level of support for one over the other could vary. If, as we move through the process, there are pieces of the overall plan, the bylaw that have to be reworked or removed, reframed in some way, then that is work that is undertaken by staff as part of that process. And it is often the case that we see significant changes to an OCP after first reading. That's not uncommon. It goes back to the community. It goes out to referral agencies. We receive feedback. It's really the first time that the community, the public, any affected parties have had a chance to read cover to cover and understand the implications. So for there to be changes after first is expected and is kind of part of the overall work plan of the project.
So if what would be an example of something that, say, the outcome of public hearing, which rather than just incorporate that input into third reading and carry on from there, results in a recommendation that you rescind first and second and go back, or rescind some reading and rewind a little bit and then follow up with a subsequent public hearing. I'm trying to get an idea as to the how significant a change would drive that, or does it never happen and you just carry straight on to third reading regardless if you've made it through the public hearing?
Through the chair to Director Davidson. So when we start contemplating changes to the OCP after a public hearing that involve issues concerning density, land use designations, that's when we may be compelled to go back, repeal readings, and then bring it back to public hearing again. So there certainly is a threshold for the kinds of changes that can occur after a public hearing. But significant changes related to density and land use designations would necessitate us going back, repealing readings, and undertaking a second public hearing.
So you use the word compelled. Does that mean that these criteria are like prescribed or
Yes.
discretionary?
They are required through the Local Government Act.
Perfect. Okay, thanks so much.
Good, thank you, Director Davidson. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I'm inclined to support Director Wardenberg's motion. My concern is with regards to perception of the public, that by combining these, that we're somehow fast tracking the development application. At the information meeting that we attended a couple of weeks ago at Scouts Hall, which was a Lake Eric neighborhood plan meeting, there were a number of residents who made comments around feeling duped, that in fact they perceived quite rightly that the neighborhood planning process has been initiated because of the development application, and there's a perception in some of the residents that this process is to fast track or to embed the development and in fact confuse people. So I just need, and also when you put up the screen with regards to the number of public meetings that have been for each, while I know that the Lake Eric plan includes the development plan, there's only been the least number of public information meetings have been specifically around the development plan. So my concern on behalf of the residents is that they get their opportunity without confusion to speak on the development application specifically. Again, you made comments about the scope and the impact of that development. I feel that it warrants the opportunity for the public to have their say, and to feel like they've had the opportunity to have their say. And you made a comment about only one public hearing is required. You used the word required in option 1. What are the public hearing options within option 1?
Through the chair to Director Castle. In terms of options, we could certainly and will in all likelihood have a number of public information meetings preceding the public hearing. So there will be significant opportunities yet for public feedback to be taken in and considered by the committee and board. And also feedback that will be used to, redevelop the plan and work through some of those policy concerns that are brought about. And typically that is our process. We precede the public hearing by at least one public information meeting, but however many are necessary to kind of reach a level of comfort with the community and with our referral agencies as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very pleased with that explanation and approach. And I would very much like to see at least one public information meeting specifically about the Lake Era gravel pit development. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Castle. Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair to presenter. Yeah, I share Director Castle's concern over the confusion has been addressed. I have concerns over that as well. I have heard from the public, and I've been at every one of these meetings, both in regard to the application from the developer for the Lake Era development, as well as the Harrison Mills Community Plan. And there is confusion at every meeting to a certain degree of why we're here and what we're here for. And I think by bringing this together, my personal opinion is that that will actually address some of this confusion. I'm also concerned about the two public hearings. If we go through that process, and we have a public hearing, if in any which way through the process, in option one, we end up with changes that are significant enough to go to a different plan, and we go through a public hearing. My concern is that that public hearing, if it's just identified as a public hearing for the Harrison Rise development, and that is satisfied through the comments of the people and changes in the plan itself and whatever, then we're going to another public hearing for the OCP. And that's just a confusing sequence, because it's just going to revisit, in my opinion, everything that just happened that was resolved in the public hearing, the prior public hearing that was just for one development. I am in support of this option. The main reason I'm in support of the option, oh, there's a couple, but the main reason is because the OCP reflects the whole area plan. It's a long-term document. The old OCP is definitely antiquated. It's an ancient document. If you look through the policies of that, and I've read it, and I encourage everyone else to read it, but some of the policies in there are just amazingly outdated. And I would prefer that this OCP, together with the two community plans, move forward, because it integrates, and correct me if I'm wrong, it'll integrate all of the different new policies, like the active transportation network. It'll the growth, regional growth strategy policies. It should incorporate all of that. Am I correct?
Through the chair to Director Wardenberg, yes, there are significant references to many new policies that have been adopted since the original OCP was adopted in 2000. Not just active transportation network plan, which is currently in a draft stage, but also our newly adopted RGS. There will be significant reference to that. Many other provincial regulations and requirements as well.
So more provincial regulations regarding the housing regulations, regarding UNDRIP, truth and reconciliation. Those are all not addressed in the old OCP. So yeah, my biggest consideration is bringing the OCP forward with the two our neighborhood plans. And yeah, because the changes that have happened in the last couple of years are, nothing's reflected in the old OCP, and it's a guiding document for a long-term process, and should be undertaken. Yeah, and that is addressed in option one, and that is why I support it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Any further discussion? Very big file, very important for us, for the electoral areas. Thank you very much, Ms. Hipwell. On the motion, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries. Thank you, staff.
So moving to item 9.2, we have building department update. This is an information item, but happy to answer any questions.
Discussion. I spoke with Mr. Alzeroff earlier today about it. It strikes me that we're trying to keep cost of homes down on one side, and at the same time, we're adding more and more regulations to what you have to do to build a home. But sure, Mr. Alzeroff advised me that these weren't really big ticket items and big improvements in our homes too. So I'm sure it's all good. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will move forward. Thank you.
9.3 is the FVRD Active Transportation Network Plan Phase 3 and the Round 2 Engagement Summary.
Discussion. Director Couse.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I'm going to stay on the public consultation theme here. Through the report, it seems to me that our next step, well, it says our next step is to develop a draft plan. And that the draft plan would be presented to the board and then posted on Have Your Say. I've expressed my concern in the past with regards to proposals that involve private property before the owners of said private property have been directly consulted. So I'd like to ask, if public access to the Nokomis Island dikes is going to be included in the proposed plan, will the owners of the private property be consulted before the plan is brought to us?
I think we'll turn things over to our Deputy Director of Regional Services, David Urban.
Yes, through the chair to Director Council. Thank you for that question. And the answer is yes, we would have those conversations.
Good. Thank you, Director Castle. I remember when Mr. Urban was handling the Trail of Island 22 and the Agassiz Bridge and the delicate nature of some of these dike discussions, and it all went very well. He used a lot of diplomacy and accomplished a lot. So I'm sure it's in good hands. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm looking at the staff report and noting that, let's see here. Sorry, I had it. Yeah, right. Okay. So staff counted approximately 84 attendees across all community meetings combined. And this is where you had 4 community meetings. So you run the numbers, you're running an average of 21 attendees per meeting. And I just struggle with, there's all sorts of graphs in there about percentages supporting whatever initiative. I'm just struggling with drawing anything conclusive in those support, do not support, whatever graphs, given to me, it's a pretty low turnout. And I think that creates challenges going forward using whatever community engagement results we have so far to inform our decision making. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not sure if staff have any comments on this. Thank you.
Yes, through the chair to Director Davidson. Appreciate your observation there of the participant turnout rate. Just want to couple it with also the impact we've had through our Have Your Say site, where I think combining a multiple prong approach to opportunity for comment served this project well. A lot of people visited the site with around 714, had a look, and then some went further and provided comment. Others may have reached out to me. We've also had different groups have conversations with us, myself and staff included. So I don't want the number of people at open houses to dictate the interest expressed in this work today.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Urban.
Sorry, can I follow up, Chair?
Go ahead.
Did I miss it? Is like the Have Your Say website, are the results recorded somewhere in the attachments to this motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Through the chair to Director Davidson, I turn your attention to the discussion section and the online engagement portion of the report.
Right. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Davidson. Director McElhonick.
I just want to thank Mr. Urban and staff for coming out and doing the good work and I'm speaking to numbers. I had one person from our area attend both and a very strong turnout for Cultus Lake area. But the person from our area E, was very informed and very connected to the issues, and I thought it was really like they were passionate, they were informed, and really good feedback and suggestions. So even though, you know, I thought there could be more people, like the people that really understand the issues and this is what I felt, that really understood the issues in their community, were there and actually provided really relevant feedback. So I felt at first I had to say I was a little bit concerned, but I felt it was covered really well, and I think it was facilitated in a way to really pull out that information and really give the residents the space and to pull out the information and really what was important to them, and they did not hold back and added really great feedback. So I thought it was very useful, and even though I was a little concerned about from area, we actually addressed the issues well, I think. So thank you to staff for that, and I found it very interesting. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Director McElhonick. Director Castle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And sorry to speak again on this. Director Davidson's comments twigged another curiosity I had with regards to the number of attendees at the community meetings. My understanding was that there was upwards of 50 people at the DeRoche Hall meeting, which then that means there was like 30 people that attended the other three. So just trying to understand, out of the 84, the majority of those people showed up to the DeRoche Hall meeting.
Yes, through the chair to Director Castle, we definitely peaked at the DeRoche community meeting and then tapered off from there with lower numbers at the other three.
And my only reason for highlighting that is just as expressed in the report. There is considerable emotion in Area G around this project.
Good, thank you, Director Castle. I think in my experience, while these meetings might not be as well attended as we would expect, there's strong appreciation in our communities for the subject matter and seeing these projects go forward. So I think very nice report that staff have produced, and thank you again. Ms. Kinnaman.
Thank you. So item 10.1.1 is Fire Department's 2023 statistics. Happy to answer any questions.
Any discussion, Director Warden?
Yeah, I was going over the statistics and I just wondered if there's any way of separating the amount of calls coming to different areas from the Northern Fraser Fire Department. Right now it is just lumped all in one, but I would just be curious if it's at all possible to see how many there's a large portion where hospital calls or medical calls, and I would be curious to see how many would be going to Area C, or if you could divide the number of call outs for different things to the different areas, because it does cover 3 electoral areas.
Sure. We can direct that question over to our Deputy CAO, Stacy Barker. I would suspect that it's possible. It just might be a very manual effort to try to match up those calls to the specific boundaries of the electoral areas, but maybe we'll just have Stacy respond.
Yeah, that's correct, Ms. Kinnaman, but we can work on that for you and we can provide that information as soon as we get that together.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg, Director House.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I just want to start by giving a shout out to all of our volunteer firefighters. This is an enormous amount of work. And we're very, very fortunate in all of our communities to have dedicated volunteers who work hard to keep our communities safe. While North Fraser does, of course, service 3 of the electoral areas, it's very interesting to me. It clearly demonstrates over half of the calls are coming into the North Fraser, and with statistics like a 14% increase in motor vehicle incident calls and 16% increase in the number of calls year over year. I think it really underscores not only the need to continue to advocate to see increased enforcement along Highway 7, also improvements to Highway 7, as we've heard from the fire chief, that a lot of these motor vehicle incidents could be prevented with better enforcement and with improvements to some of the intersections along the highway. And I think with 525 calls a year in our North Fraser Fire Department, I had talked with staff last year, requesting an understanding of what moving to a paid-on-call fire department for North Fraser might look like. And again, I just really want to reiterate that it's very important to me that the residents of those 3 areas at least have an opportunity to understand what that could look like for them. And these statistics just underscore that for me. So thank you for the report, and I look forward to exploring what an improved fire service would look like in our area.
Good. Your Director Castle. Not seeing any further discussion.
So item 10.1.2 is the 2024 deployment of fire departments for out-of-region wildfire events.
For a motion, move Director McAhonik, second Director Castle. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
10.2.1 is recovery management services, the Kukupee Creek wildfire.
Information item, discussion, directors. Hearing none, we'll move forward.
10.2.2 is the 2023 wildfire fuel management prescriptions.
For information only. Also, discussion, Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I think this kind of speaks to my question earlier about prevention and mitigation efforts. And while I appreciate the work in this report, I'm yearning to understand more about what this work actually looks like. And I'm not suggesting that we get that today, but I would love to have a better understanding of what this work actually looks like and how it could be, whether we should be doing more of it. That's all, just a comment.
Sure. Through the chair to Director Castle, staff will take note of that. It's just important to remember how much of our electoral areas are on Crown land. And so we are challenged for sure, and we don't have sort of the operational teams to undertake the actual work. But certainly, as your CAO, I felt very heartened to see that this work had been taken and was going forward to the Ministry of Forests. So that felt good after many, many years of working on this file. So, but we will take that into our advisement.
Thank you, Director Castle. Seeing no further discussion, we will move forward.
10.2.3 is the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Evacuation Route Planning Grant 2024 endorsement request.
Director Wardenberg, second Director Johnson. Any discussion? This is Hemlock Valley.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it. If we can get the grant, I'm sure the people up there would appreciate a study done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
And moving to reports by electoral area directors.
Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I was pleased with the discussion this morning at the Regional and Corporate Services Committee around working together for a regional response and strategy to deal with the illegal fill that's been happening in the electoral areas. As predicted by Director Davidson, fill has started to arrive beyond the ALR lands in Area G and in Area C. Folks in the non-ALR areas of those areas are now being solicited by contractors to accept fill on their properties in Desroches and are being offered large sums of money. We have one site that has been established in Desroches already. Fortunately, the property owners have made the decision to do the right thing, and they've consulted with the FVRD and provincial agencies to ensure they are proceeding legally, and they really have the best interests of the neighborhood as their priority. And then we began receiving calls last week that residents of the Brooks Road area of Area C have started getting knocks on their doors with promises of large sums of money if they allow fill to be dumped on their properties. I was very happy this morning that a motion was passed directing staff to convene a meeting with the CAOs to discuss developing a regional strategy to respond to this challenging issue. It quite frankly is the Wild West out there with regards to this fill, and as was predicted, the enormous pressure that all agencies have been putting on the fill sites on the agricultural lands. They're now moving their way out, and some of these properties that they're approaching, they are up or down long winding country roads that are not noticeable or visible by the highway. So a lot of these dump sites, if they are established in those areas, could go largely unnoticed by the community. So I'm very happy with the discussion, and I'm sure Director Davidson will be interested to hear more about that discussion and how it went down. But I appreciate again Chair Dickey bringing that forward at the RACS committee meeting, and for the motion that was made. Just an announcement that the Desroches Farmers Market is kicking off this Saturday, their Mother's Day market. It's going to be Saturday from 10 to 2 at the parking lot of the FVRD Community Access Center in downtown Desroches. Invite you to come out, a beautiful drive. Yes, Director Wardenberg, I'm inviting people to come to Area G for economic benefit, of course. Support our farmers market, and of course, happy Mother's Day to all of the moms out there.
Great. Thank you, Director Castle. Director McElhone.
Thank you. We had the community wildfire preparedness meeting last Monday at Chilliwack River Valley Fire Hall. Not a huge turnout, but it was very well presented, and the people that were there were very engaged. And just wanted to thank our fire chief for putting that on, having the wildfire staff come out. They're actually have asked to be added to our stakeholder group working with the rural homeless, so that we've got a new so they're going to be a part of that now, which is really great. And also a shout out and thank you to Andrew Schellenberg for the Fire Smart presentation. Every time I watch it, I learn something new. So, and tonight I will be going and handing out flyers for the chipper program for May 17th for Slessie, which is our newest Fire Smart neighborhood in Area E. And Mother's Day breakfast in Chilliwack River Valley hosted by the Chilliwack River Valley Fire Department. And I wanted to thank Chair Lum. I did not get a chance to, but I was ill and not able to attend the LGLMA meeting. And it was really important that to me that we have the resolution passed that would impact people that were negatively impacted by climate events, losing their homes and those kinds of things that fall through the cracks. And And I believe he spoke very passionately and eloquently, and it was passed unanimously. So I was able to let our residents know, the 6 that are impacted and still haven't had resolution from the province 2.5 years later. So, you know, that really, really meant something. So really happy to hear that. And I think that's it. And I'll be going to the Post Creek AGM on the 19th. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Wardenberg.
Yeah, thank you. I did have a chance to attend the LMLGA, and I was quite happy to see all the resolutions that were proposed from the Fraser Valley Regional District pass, most of them unanimously. And I was able to attend 2 public information meetings for the Area C OCP and the 2 neighborhood plans. I look forward to seeing Director Castle at the DeRoche Farmers Market, which is run by residents of Area C. So even though it's in Area G, and I look forward to seeing him on his own turf. That's all I got. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Alternate Director Dean. Okay, thank you. Director Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I'm really happy to see the planned work underway at the Boston Bar Fire Hall. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Johnson. Director Dixon, are you still with us? There we go.
Yep, I'm still here. Report, just happy to be part of the ratepayers meeting last night, Columbia Valley ratepayers, and hearing about all the good work going on. And had some really positive meetings with the RCMP for summer traffic planning. Not just the RCMP, but RCMP, Cultus Lake Park Board, MODI, BC Parks, Tourism Chilliwack, and City of Chilliwack. And happy to report that the RCMP will be patrolling the road again this summer, and that towing will be in effect. So trying to get that message out early so that everybody comes along and has a great time, but that we keep the road clear and safe for emergency vehicles and for those wishing to use it. So that's great news. I also had a really good meeting with regard to the Water Safety Committee and just some of the things that are going on to especially make sure that the non-motorized vehicle vessels have a place to paddle and that the buoys are in place. And again, there'll be some education in Transport Canada out in the water this summer, along with RCMP and BC Parks, just trying to educate people around boating safety. So summer's coming, it's a beautiful day, and I'm glad to see some of these things in place. That's it for me.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. As Director Castle mentioned, illegal fill is very, very much top of mind. I know I've shared a lot of communications with you on the topic. I want to give a huge shout out to a couple of members of Hasek Valley Community Association, Bieta Coons and Camia Weaver, for essentially the physical, quite literally the physical bravery demonstrated in essentially civil disobedience, blocking trucks from bringing fill onto properties, despite being warned not to by, let's just call it law enforcement. Just doing that act seems to be proven what's necessary to increase the attention being paid to this issue. I look forward to working with staff and seeing that we're making sure that we're utilizing all the tools in our toolbox, and we're also advocating to make sure that our regulatory frameworks are up to a task, which so far, in my mind, they haven't proven that they have been up to the task. But anyway, so it's a process. We'll absolutely keep at it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. I have nothing to report from my community, but just wanted to thank the directors for all the advice. And makes my job a lot easier. Thank you. So with that, we'll turn things back to our CAO.
Thank you. So moving to public question period for items relevant to the agenda. We do have one member of the public joining us here in the boardroom today. So this would be your opportunity to ask a question relevant to the agenda.
Mr. Baker.
It appears not. So then we'll just turn things over to our corporate officer to check in online.
Thank you. We do not have any members of the public joining us on Zoom, and we have not received any written questions.
So looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion. Director Wardenberg, second Director Johnson, all in favor, contrary, motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you.
staff.